Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. This is Wendy. If you're stopping by for the very first time, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. If you like these projects, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, comment, and let me know which one was your favorite. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For our first project, we're going to be using some buffalo check ribbon, some wood leaves, and some jute twine from Dollar Tree, and then some eucalyptus leaves from Walmart, some wood beads from Amazon, and a black marker. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my eucalyptus leaves and cut these apart using my wire cutters. And for each of my napkin garnishes, I'm going to be using one stem. And these stems are 97 cents each, so it's a really good buy, but I'm just going to put about half on the top and half on the bottom. And then I used some floral tape to combine those and get those taped together, but you can skip this step and just use some jute twine to tie them together. I do that on some of them as well. So now I'm going to add my jute twine anyway, and so I'm just going to tie a knot in the middle, and then I'll take some buffalo check ribbon and tie that into the jute twine right in the middle. And I'll first dovetail the edges so that gives it a little bit of cuteness. And then I'm going to tie that in a sweet little bow. And on one side of the bow, I'm going to use a large-eyed needle to feed on 3 of these 1-inch wooden beads. And I pulled them down just a little bit and then tied a knot at the end just so that they would kind of hang off a little bit away from the bow. And I did do a double knot on the loops of the bow so that it would stay in place. So I first tried using a Sharpie to write my words on all of my leaves, and as you can see right away it started bleeding into those grooves of the wood. So you definitely don't want to use a Sharpie. I'm going to go back and do it with my paint pen, which I get from Walmart, and it didn't bleed when I used that. And so I just wrote 6 different words having to do with fall and Thanksgiving. So I wrote blessed, thankful, grateful, family, harvest, and gather. And this is for a place setting of 6, so that's why I had 6 different words. And these leaves come in a pack of 5, so you would have to have 2 sets if you were going to do a place setting of 6. But this was for my sweet friend Stacy, so I happened to have exactly 6 leaves left in my inventory, so it worked out perfectly. And as you can see, I used that downstroke faux calligraphy method, and I'll have a video that I did a while back that kind of goes into more detail linked in the description box below. But here's how they turned out, and I think this would be such a cute addition, especially for your Thanksgiving dinner, but just leaving it out on your dining room table on top of these buffalo check napkins, I think it just makes such a pretty presentation. And here it is set up on her dining room table. I love this farmhouse look. You might recognize that centerpiece in the middle there. That's also from another video that I did, so I'll have that linked in the description box below as well. But I love how this turned out, and Stacy, I love your dining room too. For our next project, we're going to be using this plastic leaf candy dish and 3 of the tall white candles from Dollar Tree. And all I'm going to do for this one is pull off my sticker from the back of my tray, and it's super easy because it's hard plastic. And then I'm going to paint the back of my tray first, and then once it dries, I'll flip it over and paint the top. You do have to be careful when you go around the edges of your tray to make sure that there's no paint buildup, otherwise it'll leave a little ridge, and I do that a lot, so I just want to warn you ahead of time, just be mindful of that. I end up giving this 2 separate coats, and I'm gonna sand it after it's completely dry, and it gives such a pretty distressed look. And even though the tray starts as being this metallic copper color, it reads as a black distressing once you sand it, so it's super pretty. So this was kind of a science experiment for me, but I ended up placing all 3 of my candles in the microwave and put it on high for 8 minutes. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work or how much wax I even needed, but I got the idea from 3 other candles that I had done in a prior DIY a while back. And in the 108-degree weather, they were in the garage and the bottom half had melted. So I thought this could be a way of making a whole new candle and just pouring it in there. So they didn't all 3 melt at the same time, but it also didn't take near as much wax as I thought it might. So it only ended up taking 1 and a tiny bit of a second one. So I just poured it in to as far as I needed, but I did need all 3 wicks and place those inside of the liquid wax. And then I'm going to take some of the cinnamon smelly goodness that the Dollar Tree has and pour some in there. So I'm thinking it might even smell good when I burn it. And then I just used a couple of skewers to make my wicks stand up straight. And even though this was an easy DIY, it was very messy. And so I should have laid some paper down before I did this on my island because it was not a very clean project. And I had a bit of a cleanup afterwards. So I'm also thinking that since these wicks are so long, I probably could have either used a tea light wick or a votive candle wick, and then I wouldn't have had to waste an actual candle on this. So now I'm going to take some jute twine and then just wrap around a couple of times to make a sweet little bow, and then I'm going to wrap that at the stem of the leaf. And then I'll take a tiny piece of boxwood that I get from Walmart for $2.48 and just tuck it right into that jute twine. And of course, make sure you keep the greenery and the twine away from the flames so that nothing catches fire, because that would be no good. And here it is all finished, and I love how this turned out. It is so pretty, and I'm trying to get a close-up so you can see the distressing. And around the edges of the wax is that cinnamon fragrance kind of peeking out and outlining the pretty white of the candle. And of course, use discretion when you're burning this. I don't know how this will react once it burns down and gets closer to the plastic. I would assume that it's gonna be okay, but just don't take any chances or leave it unattended, of course. So I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For our next project, we're going to be using a styrofoam pumpkin, some buffalo check ribbon, some pipberry garland, some nautical rope, a 9 3/4 inch square sign, a blessing sign from the Easter time signs, and some raffia. And then from Hobby Lobby, some white wood plank paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the stem out of my pumpkin, and then I'm going to use my knife to cut that in half right at that seam where the pumpkin mold comes together. And there's actually a flat part there, so if you cut right, you can actually get it to where it's perfectly flat and will go against my surface. So now I'm going to paint my pumpkin, and I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in white, pool, and celery, and I'm just going to get those all mixed up and make it look all pretty and blended. I had a viewer reach out who said that she uses the Folk Art brand and that they have a matte finish that looks a lot like the chalk paint. However, it's much cheaper. So let me know if you've tried that before, if you like it, and any feedback you might have on that, because we all want to save a buck or two. So then I'm going to go back in with my white chalk paint and go through those lines of the pumpkin and highlight that, and then over the tops with a pretty dry brush, and then I'll go back in with the blended greens and blues and just make it all pretty and distressed and whitewashed and soft looking. So now to make the stem for my pumpkin, I'm going to take some nautical rope and unwind it, and I'm going to glue that all around this skewer, leaving about an inch or so down below so that I can stick it into my pumpkin. I saw this method being used by another YouTuber, Justin Wray, who just started his channel not too long ago, and he is the king of boho. So if you guys like boho style, which is bohemian, and modern farmhouse looks and Dollar Tree DIYs, you definitely want to check out Justin Wray's channel, and I'll have it linked in my description box below. But he is just such a sweet soul, and his style is impeccable. So definitely check him out and let him know that I sent you, and you will not be disappointed. So now I'm going to take my black chalk paint, which is called ink, and I'm going to paint my blessing sign. And I give this about 2 or 3 coats because you'll have a little bit of the metal poking through, and so I want it completely black to match my frame of my sign. So now I'm going to take my sign and take out the insides, and you always have to be careful with these little tabby thingies because they're not that sturdy and they could break off, so just be careful when you're pulling them up and putting them down. So now I'm going to take that backing and I'm going to trace it onto my plank paper from Hobby Lobby, and I get these for 25 cents each because it's $1 when you buy 4, otherwise they're 69 cents each, so you just might as well buy 4. So now I'm going to place that back into my frame and close up my little tabbies, and I made sure to put the nails at the top of my sign. So now I'm going to take my stem and pop it into the top of my pumpkin to make a hole, and then I'll pull it back out and hot glue it so that I can stick it back in there and it'll stay in place. And then I'm going to hot glue the entire pumpkin on the back and also on the back part of my stem, so the stem will really stay in place because it's attached to the sign. And then I'm going to rest it on the top part of that bottom ledge. And then I'm going to give him a haircut so that he's not out of control at the bottom of his stem. And then I'll glue my blessing sign right on top of that. So now to embellish my pumpkin, I'm just going to take some Dollar Tree lace and some sage green grosgrain ribbon and make a sweet little bow by folding it over in thirds, and then I'll wrap a piece of wire around that and twist it in the back to get that all nice and secure. And then I have these metal leaves that I used in my prior DIY from the little red truck plaques. And so I'm going to take that and kind of curve it so that it kind of lays over the side of the pumpkin. So I'll hot glue that down, and then I'll take the little raffia bow that was already on it and attach that to the middle of my bow. So now I'm going to make a single tendril using the pipberry garland, and I just wrapped it around a pencil and then pulled it off of there, and then I'm going to stick that into that top part of my pumpkin. And then I'm going to take some of these Dollar Tree pine cones and place 2 right at the middle of my raffia bow, and it's all done. And here it is all finished, and I think this is so cutie patootie. This is a really versatile sign because you can make the pumpkin any color that you want. So if you're doing the traditional oranges and fall colors in your home decor, this will be so pretty in those colors, and really any color that you use because it'll pop against that black and white. You can also lean this against something, or you can hang it up, or you could even put it on a plate holder. So it's super versatile and can go anywhere. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For our next project, we're going to be using this Dollar Tree Farm Fresh apple sign, and I really like the sign the way it is, so I wanted to try and salvage the actual paper that's on top of this. So I'm going to use my Cricut spatula, and you don't have to do this, but this is going to be a gift, so I wanted to make sure that the back was nice and clean, but I also wanted to save the image for a possible future DIY. I've tried doing this before and it's never really worked out, but this time it did, and a little patience paid off and I was able to save the image, and I'm excited about that. So now I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white, and I'm just going to cover the entire plaque, and I'm using my Annie Sloan paintbrush. I get a lot of questions about this paintbrush, and it is super easy to use, but you can only get it online on the Annie Sloan website unless you have an Annie Sloan paint store nearby. And there are some other certified Annie Sloan websites out there as well, so just Google it and you'll find it. So those are the only places that you can get them, and I think they're about $40, so a little pricey, but pretty much well worth it. So now I'm going to take some spackle and fill in my holes, which I'll change my mind on that later and poke those back out in the end. But in the meantime, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in Celery and in Nimbus, which is like a light gray color, and then I'm going to start blending my colors and shading it in. I don't want this to look like a pumpkin because the shape is dangerously close to that same shape of a pumpkin. So I want to make sure that I don't have as much of the lines going down that I do when I do my pumpkins. I want this to look like a shiny, smooth apple. So I'm just blending and softening the areas where I'm changing colors and giving it some shading where it should be and some shadows by making it a little bit darker in the green areas. And then to give it a little shininess, I'm going to take my white and make a round curve towards the end. And I think it looks like a shiny green apple. So now I'm going to paint my leaf, and I first started with some celery, and then I'm going to add some Nimbus, and I probably should have added some brown to this just to give it a little bit more contrast between the leaf and the apple, but I didn't, and it's still cutie patootie. But if you do this project, you might want to try adding some, at least around the corners. So now I'm going to take my jute twine and tie a knot at the bottom of my stem, and then I'll wrap it all the way up to the top of the stem, and I used a little bit of hot glue at the top just to keep it all secure, and then I'm going to wrap it back down to meet with that other piece and then tie that in a knot. So now I'm going to go onto my silhouette suite, and I'm going to cut out Proverbs 22:6. And to get my shape, I just used my freehand tool icon and drew the shape of a half of an apple, and then put my measurements in there to make it the same height and halfway across my board. And then I mirrored it to the opposite side, and then it was a full apple. So I was able to kind of get the idea of what shape I was going to be putting this on, and then I designed my decal for inside those lines. And it worked out pretty well. So this was my first time trying it, and you'll see it fits pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to weed out my entire decal and get all of that extra vinyl off, and then I'm going to put my FRISCO craft transfer tape on top of it, and then squeegee it on there, and then pull off the backing paper, and then I'll apply it to my apple and then pull off the transfer tape from there. And this scripture says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So now for embellishments, we're going to use 3 different Dollar Tree ribbons, some jute twine, and some more pipberry garland. And so I just cut some strips of the ribbon, and I'm going to dovetail the edges and get those all cutie patootie. And then I'm going to attach those together using the pipberry garland and wrap it in the back just like I do with most of these little fakey bows, I guess. And then I'll attach that just under the stem, and then I'm going to also add some Dollar Tree pomegranates that I had used in a prior DIY. Well, I didn't use them. I got them ready to be used and then didn't end up using them. And so I'm going to take some more of my jute twine and make a sweet little bow and just wrap it over a few times and then tie it together with another piece and attach that to the top of my bow. And then just to give it a little more cuteness, I took the ribbons and kind of frayed the edges so that they look all nice and rough. And then I'm also going to add a tiny piece of some lamb's ear from Walmart, and I just took the very top of that stem and added it behind my bow. So if you couldn't tell already, this is for Cadence's teacher, Mrs. Umari, who has been doing the distance learning here in Bakersfield, California, and she has been so patient and so kind. And so we really just wanted to give her some love and show her that we care, as we do for all teachers, my sister being one of them, who I know all of them are going through such a challenging year. So this is just our way of saying we appreciate you. And we also appreciate Gaga, who's been doing the distance learning with Cadence from 7:30 in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you, Gaga. And just know that we're praying for all of the teachers out there, and I have a feeling people are going to understand what it takes to be a teacher after all this. So I decided I wanted to go ahead and hang this, so I poked out my holes that I had originally filled, and I'm going to place some jute twine in there and then feed on some beads from Amazon, which I'll also have linked in the description box below, as well as in my Amazon store. And so I just did 20 beads and made a loop in the middle so that it can be hung, and then tied off the other side. And then just to give it some more farmhouse cuteness, I took some sandpaper and sanded the edges. And I love doing that when it's on these wood signs because the brown shows through and it makes it look so cutie patootie. And here's my sweet granddaughter Cadence after a long day of schoolwork and getting ready to take her sign to the school for Mrs. Umari. And I think this turned out so stinking cute, and I love everything about it. I love the soft colors, and from what I understand, this should go perfectly in her house, and I'll have this decal available in my Etsy shop. And I forgot to tell you the fonts that I used, which was American Typewriter for the child and Depart. And then for the cursive writing, it's Autumn and November. But I'll have those listed in my description box below. I love this, and I hope you like it too. And I encourage everyone to do something sweet for your teachers to show them how much you care. For our next Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 2 glass bowls and 2 glasses. And so this is so easy, but I love how this turns out. I'm just going to take the stickers off, and I'm going to use my E6000 as well as some hot glue and attach my glasses to the bottom of my bowls. When you're putting it on there, make sure that you're separating the glue from the E6000 because I guess there's some kind of chemical reaction and it doesn't stick quite as well. And then you should let that dry for about 24 hours because these glasses are weighted at the bottom and so they're super heavy, but that also means that they're going to be super sturdy too. So you could leave these just the plain glass that it is, and I really like that smoky look of the glasses, but I decided to paint these, of course, and I'm going to paint them with my Waverly White chalk paint. And I just gave these 2 coats, and I went all in the horizontal direction because I want this to look like a ceramic or some kind of clay with a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to go in with my brown chalk paint, which is called Truffle, and using a fan brush, I'm going to lightly distress it and give it some more cuteness. So for inside of our candle holders, I'm going to use some Walmart greenery. This is the boxwood. And then from Dollar Tree, I'm going to be using 2 round styrofoam pieces, 2 battery operated candles, and then a pumpkin stem. And the stems from Walmart, I wanted to show you the difference between the light green and the dark green boxwood stems, and you can see the difference in the colors. So I really like the darker one better, but I ran out, so I'll be using both. So now I'm going to take my styrofoam piece and hot glue that to the bottom of my bowl, and then I'm going to take some Dollar Tree moss and tuck that in around the sides and on the top of the styrofoam. It's not really going to show, but just in case it peeks out, I don't want to see any styrofoam. So there's a little tabby inside of your battery operated candles, and I'm not going to glue this down so that you can actually use it, but you do have to pull the little tabby out for it to work. So now I'm going to take my dark green boxwood and I'm going to cut those apart, leaving pretty long stems so that I can let this drape down the side of my bowl. And then I'm going to take my lighter green boxwood and I'll tuck those in sideways, going around the opposite side of my bowl. So now I'm going to take my pumpkin pick, and they're actually hanging from the stem on this pick, so I have to cut those off, and then I'm going to use some extra wire from these other stems and poke that into the bottom of the pumpkin so that I can stick them into the styrofoam. And then I'm going to put 2 kind of nestling together, and then I'm going to add some Dollar Tree pine cones here and there around the edges. And then on my candles, just to give it some more cuteness, I'm going to take some jute twine and wrap it around 3 times, tie a sweet little bow, and then pop that on top. And here they are, all finished, and I absolutely love these. I know that we put dishes and bowls on top of candlesticks and glasses and anything we can get our hands on, but I just love the simplicity of these and the beautiful curves of those glasses. I think this might be one of my favorites, but I just love how it turned out and how soft and high-end looking this looks. So I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. For our final Dollar Tree project, we're going to use 4 packs of these plastic headbands, 2 galvanized buckets, and some fall stems, and a long bamboo skewer. And so what I did was I took my hot glue gun and just made a bead all the way around the skewer and then just continued rolling it so it would dry pretty evenly. And then I'm going to take my headbands, and these have circles on the ends, so they worked out perfectly, and I'm going to feed on all 6 of them, which is 2 packs of 3, and then I'm going to make another bead at the bottom portion of my skewer, and then I'm going to feed on the other side of the headbands going in the opposite order that I did at the top. So the last one will be the first one on the bottom, and then the second to last one will be the second one, and so on and so forth. And then I'm going to spread those out and hot glue over the skewer and let it kind of drip down into those nooks and crannies so that it all stays in place. And I'm going to do the same thing with a different pattern of headband, and this one has a little skinnier opening, so I had to use a smaller skewer for this one. So then I took them outside, and I'm going to spray paint them using this Rust-Oleum hammered white spray paint. And the only reason I even used this hammered spray paint is because I was out of my regular Rust-Oleum white spray paint. So I just used what I had and painted these on the inside, the outside, and then I flipped them over and painted them from upside down. And so now I'm going to take my pumpkin chalk paint and go along the edges of both of my pumpkins. Oh yeah, these are pumpkins, by the way. And I'm going to paint them on the insides and outsides, not completely, but just to give it some oranginess so that you know that they're pumpkins. And this would be a really cool DIY if you just wanted to make orbs, because I think they turned out really cute. But I pushed them down a little bit so that you could tell that they were actual pumpkins. So I just poked them into some floral foam so that they would stand up while I was painting them. So now where all that gobbledygoo is, where I had hot glued the skewer to the headbands, I'm going to cover that all up using my jute twine, and I'm just going to feed it in and out and make sure that that's all covered. And that's also going to serve as the stem once I get to the top. And once you get past the headbands, it's easy breezy because you just twirl the skewer and it covers it up, and you can make it as fat or as skinny or as tall as you want. So I made one fat and one skinny just to give them a little bit of difference. So now I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in ink, and I took off a few of the rows of rope underneath so that I could paint up there and not get it on my rope, and then I'll glue that back once I get it all painted. So now I'm going to take my Dollar Tree floral foam, and I'm going to cut that down to the size that I need it so it doesn't show over the edge of the bucket. And I'm going to hot glue that to the bottom. And then if you happen to have a Dollar Tree plastic bag, this would be the time to use it. And I just tucked that inside and then added some Dollar Tree moss to the top. And then I'm going to poke in my pumpkin, and then I'll cut apart my fall picks and start adding those in to the middle. And I wanted to keep them all towards the center so you could see the outside shape of the pumpkin. So I just tucked those in there and made that all cutie patootie. And then once I got everything in place, I decided that I wanted to add some brown to the outside of my pumpkin just so it wasn't such a bright orange. And so I'm just going to use my truffle again to knock that color down, but you could leave it this way, or you could even just paint it completely orange. But I knew I wanted to spray these, so that just made it a little easier for me. But I do think the completely orange would be cute too. So then I'm going to take my Silhouette Cameo 3 and I'm going to cut out the words "Give Thanks," and I used the font called Sophie, and that's from thehungryjpeg.com, and I'm going to place those on the outside of my pots, and then it's done. And here they are all finished, and I think these turned out super, super cute, and they're totally unique, and I'll probably use this method again to make orbs or I don't know, something else, maybe a bird cage or something. But I love the black with the jute rope and combined with the pine cones and the cotton and those cattails. I just think it's super adorable. I love it. I hope you guys like it too. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. I'm really trying to stay on top of all of my correspondence, and I love that you guys send me pictures of your projects and tell me your stories and your testimonies and requesting prayers. I love that you're doing that, or if you have questions about whatever. It doesn't matter, but I'm just so happy that you're here. And actually today is my very first full year of YouTube. So I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye.